Good morning, everyone. This is Doug. This is an episode about my answers to questions that people have raised about the prior episode, which is Jesus never said New Covenant, the corruption of Luke 22:20. So basically, people ask me questions. Why is Mark and Matthew still reading in the King James? There, we can still see the word New Covenant, and so why didn't they re-release it in a different way? Well, that's not their obligation. Their obligation is to give you exactly how it was printed in 1611, and that's it. So, but we gave an answer, and I want to give you the same answer here. So the way to address this is ask the question, why did all Bibles published since 1946 remove the word new before the word covenant from Mark and Matthew, leaving the words what Jesus expressed was the blood of the covenant, that this was my blood of the covenant. And then we'll study that a little bit today. Now, I answered the person, one of the key things is I said, look, every modern edition of the New Testament since 1946 corrected the corruptions of adding new to both Mark and Matthew before the word covenant. This began with the RSV in 1946, and all new editions since, this is the 1946 Revised Standard, the 1963 New American Standard, and the 1966 Good News Bible, 1973 New International Version, we all love that one, 1996 the New Living, I enjoyed that one too, 2001 New English Version, I really like that version as well, 2005 New English Translation, my favorite currently. In 2008, Bill Mounsey, Greek New Interlinear. He's also, I think it's indispensable we use that on Bible Gateway, by the way. It also was known previously as the Zondervan Greek and English Interlinear, and then the 2011 Disciples Literal New Testament. All of them have it where the word new has been removed from both Mark and Matthew. So let me read it in both Mark and Matthew, so you can see how it looked since 1946. And he said to them, this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many. Matthew 26:28. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're basically just going to look at Mark 14:24 real quick, and I want to show you, it says it's highly certain. It's certain. It's virtually certain. Do you see down here? Certain, virtually certain. This is the meaning when it gives an A rating. Highly certain or virtually certain. So it's saying this is really beyond any reasonable doubt that it means that we need to remove the word new in front of the word for covenant, and that leaves us with no reference to a new covenant anymore in this text, okay? Now, Matthew 26:28 is one where I want to go in a little more depth, and it's also not A, but it's B. It's almost certain, meaning the text is highly probable, though there is a slight or minor degree of doubt regarding the variant, and it also has it just simply the covenant, not the new covenant. Here's the full exposition of Matthew 26:28 in the UBS 5th edition, 2014. Here's the Greek up here, and here's the translation. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Here is the UBS 5th edition, 2014, excuse me. This is the text that you get. It's a complete text of the Greek. And then you see my translation of this verse for Matthew 26, verse 28. For this is my blood of the covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sin. It gets a B rating, which means almost certain. That's pretty good. And you can see all the references that prove it. And I want to go into one of them, which is this P37. You see it even puts it in the list earliest, which means this is earlier than the Codex Sinaiticus, which is this little sigla thing here. So that means we found even a text far earlier than even the Codex Sinaiticus. And that's what I want to focus in on today, and why that's so much different. So here is Papyrus P37, 1924 discovery, or actually a purchase of this text, and it was another example of where you have this very fine quality. You see the lettering, you can almost read it from here. It's very good, and yet it's makes this case very clear as well, from 260 Christian era. And so this is more detail on it. I'm not going to go into it, but you can read it here if you want. But it's definitely a significant find, because it clarified this issue on Matthew very certainly. And here's an article in the Harvard Theological a couple of years after it was found, and it's discussing this, and it's going to tell you there are 4 readings in which the papyrus is supported by the Caesarean and Alexandrian lines, and so this is many different lines that agree, but it's its own earliest line, so it's earlier than the Codex Sinaiticus, it's earlier than Vaticanus. Vaticanus is a B, Codex Sinaiticus is this little sigla here. To me, it really looks like an N, but it's not what it is. So you've got the Codex Sinaiticus, the Vaticanus. These are very early, and these are later in time over here. So you've got the P37, then you got 360 over here with the Codex Sinaiticus, and Vaticanus is sometime in the 300s. No one can be absolutely sure where it fits in there. So this is overwhelming, truly, to prove P37 has closed the door on Matthew having anything to do with a new covenant either. And again, just to show you how it all works, here's the sigla, here's the B for Codex Vaticanus, here's the word canis. Down here, it was omitted. That's what they're saying when you look at the Harvard Theological Review. So it's just saying it's not there. It omits that, and it tells you all the references there are, aside from, because it's dealing with P37. So P37 now fits in here. That's what you saw earlier in the UBS. It puts the P37 as first. And now this is a Harvard Theological article that's telling people we need to put this first now. See, it's a discovery. So it's still in that phase. Just so you know, the Codex Sinaiticus is dated to 330 to 360, and that's this little squiggly thing that looks like an N. And then B is the Vaticanus. Here it is. And here's the Codex Sinaiticus. So this just helps you know the reference points. But anyway, it's, again, overwhelming right now, right? And Cyril of Alexandria also quotes it in the 4th to 5th century. And that's that. So again, this is why the conclusion should be exactly as this text here has it. Matthew 26:28, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Okay, now I want to talk about Erasmus. Okay, so a lot of people are saying, well, the Bible's inerrant. You're not allowed to do what you're doing, Doug. You're a heretic because you're saying the Bible has flaws in it, and that must be from Satan. Okay. Now, I respect that, but it's based on some misinformation that you've been given. And I'm going to show you what that misinformation is in a second. Now, who put together the Bible you're currently reading? Well, it was Erasmus, derivatively. Okay, he lived in the 1516 period where that's where he was working on the Bible for the first time. He's the first translator from Greek to Latin for centuries, since Jerome did it in 383. So we're talking about over 1,200 years later, he's picking up the pen to do this great work for everybody. And he's doing the best he can with 6 or 7 manuscripts, and they're not all the same quality, and some have errors, and some have interpolations that are obvious, and so on. So he's trying to make selective decisions what should be going in there. So he has no theory of that he's acting under inspiration, and that's who put together the original text that became the Textus Receptus, or the received text. Now, when the King James came around, actually they switched a lot over to the Codex Bezae, so I don't want to over-exaggerate his role in the actual King James. We'll get to that in a minute. So, but Erasmus created this idea that how are you to make a decision about changing the Bible when you see a conflict between two versions? And so I want to read this to you because it's so important. All right, now let's listen to Erasmus. He says this: "You cry out that it is a crime to correct the Gospels. This is a speech worthier of a coachman than of a theologian. You think it is all very well if a clumsy scribe make a mistake in transcription, and then you deem it a crime to put it right. The only way to determine the true text is to examine the early codices." End of quote. What he is saying there is the only way to decide the Bible isn't, pray and God would inspire me to rewrite the Bible the way it was originally written. No, the only thing you can do is go back to the oldest codices and try to make the change from them, because you have to presumptively view those as more valid than the later. That's all you can do. But he was so limited. He had only texts that went back as far as the 1300s. So he's writing in the 1500s. He's only 200 years away from these texts, and still he's nowhere near the early church records. He has none of that. Anyway, I want to go back to the prior episode where we were discussing Luke 22:19b to 20. This was an edition that you could find in the Codex Bezae. So I want to show you here. I picked up the Codex Bezae today and I went through it. It's in public domain. It was in 1864, and I started going through it. And I double checked, and my recollection was correct, that the King James Bible was predominantly relying upon the work of Theodore Beza as the scholar. And so it says here, despite his deep dislike for Calvinist political theory, King James and his translation committee knew they could not ignore the best linguistic scholar available. Theodore Bezae was universally recognized as the premier Greek textual scholar in Europe. Thus, they used the French Calvinist Greek text, meaning that the Codex Bezae, to translate the New Testament, even though they were using it to replace the Calvinist English Bible. So that means the Codex Bezae was in their hands, their primary text to making the translation. Now, please look. See, here it is. I'm going to show you. Please look at what we can see in Luke 22. See, Luke 22. This is Luke and up here. Luke 22. Here's verse 19. Notice there's nothing between, there's no 20, there's no 19b, and there's no 20. See that? So when you do a translation, this comes out to where those verses don't exist. And that's where in the text that you see in the King James, it'll say the opposite. It'll say something. It'll say that Jesus broke this bread and then gave the cup and called it the cup of the new covenant. But here in the Codex Bezae, which is the text that they're predominantly the King James using, they're not following it. So this was the chance where it could have survived and been used in the King James Bible, but they decided to reject it. See what I'm saying? So this is not rational. This is not rational behavior. And but it is theological, meaning, oh my gosh, we don't have it. I mean, they may already know that Matthew and Mark don't really have any New Testament either, or New Covenant or language, and now you would have no New Covenant language here. You would have to go back to Exodus 24 to know what Jesus is really talking about. And so they just ignored it. But this was in their hands. I thought you'd find that very interesting, and they didn't use it. And this was their primary text. So there was a chance to get back to the real version of the Bible right there at the King James, but somebody made a human choice not to do this, not to correct it, not to follow what they knew they should have done. And so this is in the King James Bible translators' hands, and they fumbled the ball. This is what was really a corruption, and now it's well known. All right, so I'm going to sign off here, but I'm going to make available all the public domain available books that I've mentioned. I have to prepare them. I want to make them for NotebookLM that you can use them and research using them. You upload it into notebook.google.com, and you will find you can do all kinds of amazing research. And that's how I find a lot of these things. I can just literally ask it to do stuff. I have to sometimes OCR, optical character read, using Adobe Acrobat, the text here in Greek. I'll run a text over here. This is actually, even though it's a Latin, you can see it's the same as English. So it's also an English translation. We'll get this grabbed and screen optical character read. So you can then do researches. And so I'm going to make it as accessible as I can. And you can acquire that in my PayHip store. It'll be in the description to the video. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.